Most tanks are described as powerful. The M1 Abrams makes that word feel inadequate. Its exhaust runs hot enough to scorch a uniform from 10 feet away. Its gun fires a rod of metal so dense it partially liquefies steel on contact. It weighs 68 tons and still outruns a lot of the vehicles chasing it. And it burns roughly 10 gallons of fuel for every single mile it travels. None of that is classified. That's just Tuesday. The details that actually surprise people are buried deeper. The tank that has never lost an entire crew to enemy fire. The armor recipe so sensitive it has never been shared with any foreign government, including allies who operate the exact same vehicle. The engineering decision to keep a human being loading shells by hand when every other major army automated that job decades ago. And somewhere at the bottom of a Kuwaiti harbor, one very expensive piece of American military hardware that nobody ever went back to retrieve. These are 20 weird facts about the M1 Abrams that most people have never heard. Stay with me, because some of these will genuinely change how you think about modern warfare. Start with the engine, because nothing else about this tank makes sense until you understand it. The Abrams doesn't run on a traditional diesel like most military vehicles. It runs on a gas turbine, the same fundamental technology that powers jet aircraft. The AGT 1500 turbine produces 1500 horsepower and can spin up from cold to full power in under a minute. That's extraordinary for a vehicle weighing 68 tons. The trade-off is fuel consumption so extreme it borders on absurd. At full combat speed, the Abrams burns approximately 10 gallons of fuel per mile. Not per hour, per mile. A single tank crossing from one end of a city to the other can drain its fuel tanks in minutes if the driver pushes it hard. The Army calls this the tank's gas hog problem, and it has shaped entire military logistics strategies around a single vehicle. Because it runs on a turbine, the Abrams can technically burn almost any fuel that will ignite cleanly enough. Jet fuel, diesel, kerosene, heating oil, and aviation gasoline all work. During early development, Army engineers noted in internal documentation that the turbine could theoretically run on alcohol-based fuels and certain commercial petroleum blends, which led to the widely repeated claim that it could run on perfume. That story is almost certainly exaggerated, but the underlying point is real. The flexibility was intentional. Battlefield logistics are chaotic, and designers wanted a tank that could grab fuel from any source it found, whether that was a military depot or a captured airfield. That turbine comes with one consequence nobody talks about in recruitment brochures. The exhaust exits at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Crews learned very quickly during early deployments in the Gulf War not to let infantry walk behind a running Abrams. The heat plume extends far enough and burns intensely enough to cause serious injuries. During training exercises, soldiers have had uniforms scorched just from standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The Army had to issue specific infantry protocols to account for this, which is not something you typically have to write a manual about. Then there is the weight. At 68 tons, this is heavier than any tank the United States has ever fielded in combat. To put it physically, if you stacked 45 standard family cars on top of each other and somehow made them drive, that's roughly the ground pressure you're dealing with. It's so heavy that many bridges in Europe and the Middle East literally cannot support it. When NATO began planning Abrams deployments during the Cold War, the Army had to conduct full structural surveys of bridge networks across West Germany to figure out which routes the tanks could actually use. Some bridges had to be rebuilt entirely, and yet, despite all 68 tons of it, the Abrams can reach 45 miles per hour on a hard surface. In a straight race against a highway patrol car, it would lose, but it would make the patrol car work for it. The combination of extreme weight and high speed creates a kinetic energy so large that stopping the tank in an emergency is itself a significant engineering challenge. The brakes on an Abrams are not the kind of thing you repair in a field garage. What that speed and weight are in service of is the gun. The main armament is a 120mm smoothbore cannon that fires a round called the M829, tipped with a depleted uranium penetrator traveling at roughly 1 mile per second when it leaves the barrel. Depleted uranium is almost twice as dense as lead, which means the penetrator punches through armor not by exploding but by sheer kinetic force. When it hits steel armor, the uranium rod and the steel both partially liquefy on contact. The technical term is self-sharpening. As the rod penetrates, it sheds material in a way that keeps the tip sharp rather than blunting against the surface. It's a physics phenomenon that sounds impossible but has been confirmed in thousands of test firings. The accuracy that gun achieves is extraordinary enough to be almost unsettling. During the Gulf War in 1991, U.S. Army crews recorded confirmed kills on Iraqi tanks at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters, nearly 2 miles. In several documented engagements, Abrams crews hit moving targets at over 2,500 meters while the Abrams itself was also moving. The fire control computer calculates crosswind speed, air temperature, barrel wear, vehicle tilt, and target motion simultaneously, adjusting the aim point in real time. The gunner tells the system what to shoot. The computer decides exactly when and where. What made that even more one-sided is the thermal imaging system, which sees heat rather than light. An Abrams crew can acquire and engage targets in total darkness, in smoke and fog, and even through light foliage. During training exercises, instructors have hidden vehicles behind hay bales, camouflage nets, and bushes. The thermal system sees them anyway because engine heat bleeds through everything. During the Gulf War, Iraqi tank crews had no idea they were being targeted until the round was already traveling toward them. The Abrams was firing in conditions where Iraqi crews couldn't see well enough to aim. Part of why crews survive those engagements, even when things go wrong, comes down to a design decision that looks almost invisible from the outside. The crew of 4 lives in a compartment deliberately isolated from the ammunition. The roughly 40 rounds the tank carries are stored behind an armored bulkhead in what's called the ammo bustle at the rear of the turret. If an enemy round penetrates the bustle and detonates the ammunition, blowout panels on top channel the explosion upward and away from the crew. It doesn't guarantee survival, but in real combat in Iraq, there are documented cases where the bustle exploded. The panels worked exactly as designed, and all 4 crew members walked out alive. If you're finding these facts as wild as we did, hit subscribe now. There are more videos just like this one waiting for you, and you don't want to miss the next one. That brings up something that surprises almost everyone who hears it. In every confirmed case where an Abrams was knocked out by enemy fire in Iraq and Kuwait, at least some of the crew survived. Every single time. Vehicles have been total write-offs, but the crew compartment held. No enemy weapon has ever killed an entire Abrams crew in combat. That is not luck. It is the direct result of the blowout panels, the composite armor, and 40 years of iterative design decisions made by engineers who understood that the tank is expendable and the crew is not. The friendly fire record is a separate, grimmer story. 2 American soldiers were killed in 1991 when their Abrams was struck by a round from another American tank, penetrating the rear of the vehicle, which is the thinnest section of the armor. It belongs in a different category than enemy action, but it is worth saying plainly. The tank defeated every enemy who tried to kill its crew. It could not always protect crews from each other. The armor that made those survivals possible is itself classified. The exact composition of the Chobham-style composite used in the Abrams is a U.S. government secret. What is publicly known is that it combines steel, ceramic plates, and other materials in a layered configuration that defeats both kinetic penetrators and shaped charges through completely different mechanisms. Shaped charge warheads, like those in rocket-propelled grenades, work by forming a superplastic jet of metal that burns through armor. The ceramic layers disrupt that jet before it can fully form. The steel layers handle the kinetic threats. It's a 2-problem solution in one package, and the exact recipe has never been released. That secrecy extends to export customers. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Kuwait, Australia, and Iraq all operate versions of the Abrams, but none of them get the full package. Export variants do not include the classified depleted uranium armor that American crews sit inside. The U.S. government has never shared the full armor specification with any foreign buyer, including close allies. The tank is the same, the protection is not. Keeping that armor effective has come at a cost. Upgrading the Abrams over the decades has made it significantly heavier than the original design. The first M1 weighed around 60 tons. The current M1A2 V3 variant weighs closer to 73 tons with all its added armor packages. The same turbine engine from 1980 now has to move 13 additional tons. The power-to-weight ratio has declined noticeably, and the Army has been studying engine replacement options for years. The tank keeps growing faster than the solutions can catch up. All that weight creates a secondary problem. You cannot drive an Abrams down a highway to get it somewhere. The tracks tear up asphalt, the weight destroys road surfaces, and at sustained highway speeds, mechanical wear accelerates rapidly. Moving one requires a specialized vehicle called the Heavy Equipment Transporter, rated for 70 tons. The Army operates hundreds of them specifically to move Abrams tanks without driving them. Even loading an Abrams onto one is a 30-minute procedure with specific ramp angles and weight distribution protocols. Once it arrives, keeping it running is a commitment most people don't anticipate. The Abrams requires 8 hours of maintenance for every hour it spends driving in combat conditions. 8 hours of work for every 1 hour of movement. Tracks, road wheels, turbine filters, gun recalibration, and dozens of smaller systems all need attention after every engagement. During the Gulf War's 100-hour ground campaign, maintenance crews worked through every night to keep the fleet operational. Without them, the advance would have stalled within days. The loader, one of the 4 crew members, manually loads each round into the 120mm gun by hand, which is unusual for a modern tank of this size. Most Russian and Soviet designs use an automatic loader. The U.S. Army kept a human deliberately. A trained loader can cycle around in under 10 seconds, clear a misfire, handle an unusual ammunition type, and make judgment calls a mechanical system cannot. The Army decided the 4th person was worth the extra weight, and the combat record suggests they were right. The sound alone is something you don't forget. The turbine produces a distinctive high-pitched whine that carries for miles and sits at a frequency that causes physical discomfort before it causes hearing damage. Crews who trained without adequate hearing protection during the 1980s and 1990s have documented cases of permanent hearing loss. Former tankers describe it not as a roar like a diesel engine, but as a scream, a sustained mechanical scream you feel in your chest before you even hear it with your ears. Veterans at tank reunions still talk about it decades later, not with complaint but with a kind of reverence, the way people describe standing too close to a waterfall. And then there is Kuwait. During the post-Gulf War withdrawal, a tank being loaded onto a ship slipped from the loading equipment and went straight into the harbor. 68 tons of the most advanced armor in the world, sinking to the floor in front of the people who were supposed to be moving it. Recovering it turned out to be logistically complicated enough and embarrassing enough that the decision was eventually made to simply leave it. No formal announcement, no recovery operation. Just a very expensive piece of American military hardware sitting on the bottom, slowly rusting in salt water, somewhere beneath the surface of a Kuwaiti harbor. It is, as far as anyone can tell publicly, still there. That tank on the harbor floor is a fitting reminder that the Abrams program has now been running for over 40 years with no current plans for replacement. The machine designed to fight a Cold War enemy that no longer exists is still the backbone of American armored warfare today. The next generation combat vehicle program is meant to eventually succeed it, but funding cycles and the sheer complexity of the problem have pushed any realistic replacement past 2040. 68 tons, 45 miles per hour, 8 hours of maintenance for every 1 hour of driving, a crew that has never been killed by an enemy. And somewhere beneath the surface of a Kuwaiti harbor, a monument to the gap between engineering excellence and the guy operating the loading crane. The M1 Abrams is not just a weapon. It is 4 decades of proof that the most powerful army on Earth is also occasionally very human.